and and that was what Attila did. Um, so I mean, you try to rationale like, okay, so how did this fairly sophisticated society come to terms with that? Great, everything we had is gone. Everything that that we relied on and made us a community and a civilization is gone now. Has been destroyed. Um, and you can imagine that. So that's like in the large towns, the small cities. Uh, but the cities, yeah, like especially large cities and the huge cities, they call them. But imagine how those communities would react and survive based on that. And I think this is possibly how you saw the rise of what happened in Italy. They had all these different little nation states which were familial based. And why? And the reason why is because, as we can see in Rome, family was everything. It's this. This guy joked around and said, "Where do you think the mafia got it from?" It's like it's in the Italians' blood, kind of thing. That they have these kind of family organizations and relationships, and that's how they control things. And it's like, okay, yeah, it kind of makes sense, because I mean, I think that they possibly missed the mark a little bit, but then again, maybe they got it in that when you watch Julius Caesar in action, you should be thinking of him as Tony Soprano in a way, So it's but then again, yeah, it's a good interpretation of JC. Sorry, I'm scatological, but I like to try to get a lot of different things when I'm talking about history. So they come in, the barbarians come in, they burn down your settlement, your town, the place you've been living, calling home. Generations of your family have been calling home. It's like you have family. There's cemeteries, huge cemeteries, right near your community, and they're well maintained. And it's like it's your generations of ancestors. Because that's the other thing, they were kind of into ancestor worship and respect. That's why they had the faces everywhere. I've heard one interpretation by Professor Lumsden back at UC Santa Barbara that they had the bus made of the different people in your family, but they would be in a row. That it's like you would walk down a row of them, and so especially with the entrance to your house. So imagine that you are the inheritor of this family line, this name. You basically, what makes you is your family, what the things your family has done, and and it's a code of ethics and morals. So that's why Rome was always expanding, because you basically had these guys who were realized, I have to do more, I have to conquer more, I have to fight more, I have to basically prove myself more than my ancestors, kind of thing. And that's the other thing. They wanted more. It wasn't that you had to equal them in any way, shape, or form, or at least follow in the footsteps of them. It's like no, you had to do it and do it more. And that's why they became just these radical, crazy guys. But also why they expanded. And then a fairly large number of people, they dug it. They liked Roman civilization enough that they kept. Think of it. Hundreds of years of Rome left over, and there's always somebody fighting over who was Caesar, who was the guy in charge. And the thing is, the civilization, the people didn't really fragment; they stayed the same, and they stayed that way for hundreds of years. Whoever was in charge ruled things, and that's you can imagine that's kind of like why things start falling apart, because you basically all your resources are tied up in fighting each other instead of fighting the common enemy. But the people lived like that. They lived and they enjoyed it. They preferred it. So when the Roman legions pulled out of England, they don't know what really happened. But what's assumed now is that you basically kind of had like an Arthur. But what it was is that they hired mercenaries. They hired a mercenary captain, and who's possibly who was Arthur? They're thinking, but that's what they call him. They call him Arthur or Actor or something like that. And he was in charge, but basically he led the military, and he was employed by the different cities of England to fight off the Saxon invasion. And but I think really that just didn't work. That didn't happen. He tried and he died, sadly. And so in a way, you could see the story told amongst the people who were living there, and it was basically a story of encouragement and hope, and that don't worry that these evil Saxon bastards are in charge of us now. The good people will come back. It's like the good people of Avalon, and it's like, well, what's Avalon? Avalon is actually a town in France. It was a nice place. So you can imagine that. Yeah, there's the Roman community lives there. And that's why that name stuck in people's minds. Possibly. But that's also the idea of what happened in England is a micro example of what happened in the rest of Europe. The Saxons came in, and the Saxons were, they fought naked. They were just vicious, brutal warriors, and they also were just like kind of crazy. They just took they basically took whatever they could, whatever they wanted to. So I think that one movie about King Arthur, well, it's a little cheesy at moments, but I think it kind of gets some of the ideas. It's getting some of what's coming across, and that is there's just a skeleton of a force there protecting the Roman communities, and and it's like because all they were doing in their off time was barely lightly protecting, or they're barely fighting the Scots and the Picts, who it was just in their nature to raid, raid each other for goods, and so they could they just decided, oh, let's go raid the Romans. Romans got a lot more shit, so let's go get it. And that's all it was. They're just like, well, they're just fighting off these guys who just kept coming in, raiding and taking stuff, burning down villages, raping women, and but anyways, and by the way, and I keep saying stuff like rape the women because you got to remember, yeah, that's what's happening. Women are being raped constantly. And it's a very this very good society that women aren't being raped constantly. So. In Roman society, women are being raped, and it's for public display, mind you. They would have women act out, the convicts, they'd have them act out the mythological stories of either sex with an animal or, some sort of illicit sex. So they wouldn't have, people have sex. But I think they always hint and mention the sex of the animals because, well, it's been more of a lurid show, but it's like, so you kind of wonder, well, who would go see this? And you're like, well, everybody would probably see it because it's part of all the other entertainment. And for what purpose? Well, it's part of the mythology, so it's part of the very values of life that people live upon. And they saw it, and it's just like, oh, okay, that's what happens. And, jeez. That's a form of society right there. But anyways, the barbarians come in. They're organized on a familiar group into a military faction. It's a military organization based on familial relationship. And then whoever was in charge of these different families, after they were fighting each other for supremacy, but then eventually there would always be one guy who could really solidify and nail it down. And basically, he had enough sons or enough daughters, he had enough children as part of it, he had enough family members that he could marry into these other familial groups, and to basically say, hey, look, check it out now. All right, our family lines are linked by blood and marriage. And the idea is that, now your family line is going to have a stake, is going to be part of the future generations that are going to be in charge. And it's also like your family, you're basically guaranteed money, protection, and safety. And basically, when you retire and when your family, your kids are grown up, they'll be taken care of as well. So that's why they have these familial organizations, and they settle their differences and decide, okay, let's go take on the bigger fish, Rome. So what ends up happening is that you get these different migrations of people coming in.